Okay. So welcome everyone. I am delighted to be here with you today. On behalf of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at ACC, I welcome each and every one of you. And I'm excited to have with us today Rocky Lane and Sarah Swafford, who are going to be sharing some really awesome information with us today about how to be supportive to trans and gender non-binary or non-conforming individuals who you may know or meet in the future. They have agreed to graciously introduce themselves and say a little bit about their educational journey, which I'm excited to hear all about. Rocky happens to be this spoiler, but an ACC alum, so that's really cool. Rocky, Sarah, please take it from here.
Hi, we're just doing a mic check. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, hi, everyone.
Oh my.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you all. This is interesting. We've never done a live YouTube video before, but we're very excited. No, it's great to see you all. My name is Rocky.
I'm Sarah.
Sarah, we're married to each other, and that's an important thing that you should know. We'll just get that out of the way. I just wanted to say, first off, just a level setting. This is a space where we do want to welcome the idea that we are not the only trans people in the space. We want to welcome the idea that maybe folks may not have ever met a trans person. We want to welcome the idea that we're learning, growing, trying to stay curious. So we'll kind of talk about some of the community agreements that we designed around today's session and stuff after we kind of get started with. But I just wanted to say, we like to keep a pretty loose pattern here, okay? We'll kind of get through our presentation the first hour, and then we're going to let you ask your questions or dive in where we need to, because it's a big topic.
Yeah.
And we just want to say thanks for having us in this space. And I'm just going to turn on our little thing so that we can start. Does that sound?
It sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Awesome.
And don't, please don't feel any concern about asking us anything. We are very open to any of your questions. You will not offend us, embarrass us, anything like that. It's a safe space to ask these questions to people like us. So
that's true. Hang on a second. I think I have to hit share and then I'll go full screen. So here's the share. And then here's the full screen, and then we'll go back a few, give away some of our best stuff. You got to review the thing in reverse. Now you should be really ready. Excellent. I'm gonna close this down. All right. So the other thing I want to mention is that Sarah and I are YouTubers. I just said that. We have been sharing our story on the internet, not just on YouTube for, oh gosh, since 2015.
9 years, yeah.
And one of the main things that we started to discuss with our community and the world really was the fact that that trans people exist. Gender expansiveness exists in the world. And about in 2017, that's when I discovered that I'm part of that community, and I needed some help. I needed to go to some doctors. I needed to figure some stuff out. And we started talking to our community about it online a little bit. And they have a lot of questions, and that's kind of what sparked us doing some of this. So we're going to do kind of a live example of how we make our content a little bit with y'all, how we break it down, kind of what we tell folks, what has helped people in the past. And we call it our tips for better TGE relationships. What does TGE mean?
Trans and gender expansive.
Gender expansive. Some people say.
Some people say, you might hear gender non-conforming. You might hear gender queer. And these are all just sort of like umbrella terms. But I think right now at this brief snapshot in time, a lot of people are leaning into TGE or transgender expansive.
Yeah, because I think of the idea of that is they're pushing back against the idea that there's a conformity at all, which is interesting. It's an interesting thing, but you'll learn more interesting facts about this culture and this community as we move along. So I'll if you want to start on your intro, you're welcome.
Sure.
But I'm happy to. Thank you.
And I'll just say one more note really quickly too. This is such a deep topic. We're definitely kind of scratching the surface of the iceberg today. There's so much more and so much deeper that we could go with this. But yeah, again, thank you so much for having us today. We are really excited to be here with you all. My name is Sarah Swafford. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. And let's see, my educational background. So I am an EDSE certified sex educator. I'm also a relationship coach. And then as Rocky said, we are creative entrepreneurs together. We do a lot of work in the space of edutainment, we like to say. So we like to share our story and then also offer a little bit of, this viewpoint into the TG and greater LGBTQIA plus realm. As far as my educational background, I am a lifelong learner. It has been, I've tried a lot of different things, and I've gone to a lot of different school programs, from technical or like vocational type of programs to, a little bit of college smattered in there. But yeah, I don't hold a degree in higher education, but I am a lifelong learner.
Anything else you want to share about like your non-educational journey?
Well, let's see. Yeah, my non-educational journey. Yeah, I'm 35. I live here currently. Rocky and I are based out of Austin, Texas. I've been here for the better part of 20 years. And he and I do a lot of traveling in our little van named Tina. We love to
Teeny Tina.
We love to travel around, meet wonderful people, collaborate on fun creative projects, and also on advocacy related projects, especially for the LGBTQIA plus community.
That's true.
So
it's true.
Also, I love sparkly things and rainbows and glitter.
That's true. That's verified. You can check those facts. I from an educational standpoint, which I didn't start to go into yet, but I am also a lifelong learner. It was mentioned that I did end up in ACC. It took me a long time to get to ACC. I think I went the longest way possible, the longest route possible. Grew up here in Austin. My mom moved here when we were 3, single parent. Discovered that I had a little bit of a musical inclination and thought that Austin would be a good place to raise a musical child. I learned to write my first songs and sing in choir at Wynn Elementary. And I'm a very proud Austinite, even though I was born in Houston, but a lifelong Texan. And when I was growing up here, it was difficult to be a child that was showing gender diversity in any way. I played sports. That's where a lot of gender diverse kids end up. I think it's the basketball shorts, quite honestly. And it was just one of my favorite things to wear when I was a kid growing up before I got to school. And I think having a uniform was great. Having a team and friends built in was great. We won, more than we lost a lot of the times. And, I think that I probably would have gone on to go to UT or one of the colleges here in Texas, but it was such a difficult time growing up in Texas in the 1980s and early 90s and exploring gender. And I thought that really what I needed to do was turn 18 and move out west. But before I had a chance to do that, I was actually outed accidentally. My mom found letters between me and a secret girlfriend. I think that a story like this doesn't get told very much, which is the destabilization of a child kind of as they're starting to learn about themselves and what their future looks like, if that future goes the way of LGBTQIA. And when I was about 17 or 18, we kind of decided we need to move cities. And so I ended up doing split between two high schools, and that actually affected my GPA quite a lot. I got great offers to go to college, got a couple of little mini scholarships, but because I moved from being in a smaller school here in the AISD school district to the much larger Houston ISD school district, I dropped from being about top 10, top 8% of the class to about the top 15 to 20% of the class. And that did change my prospects quite a bit, including how much I could pay to go to school. So how I did it was through some interesting loans. And those loans took me all the way to Arizona, where I found some freedom. I was able to learn a little bit more about myself socially and explore outside of like kind of a bubble of the kind of culture we have in Texas. And I think that's a really valuable thing to know because it was difficult out there. I ended up moving back home, and ACC is where I found myself. And the self-pay option of ACC was actually what made this being able to use a payment plan option and put myself through the EMS program, which is where I got my associates in applied science. I ultimately got injured after about 7 years and moved into advocacy work pretty much full time. Somewhere around the same time that we started our content journey. And so I like to say that ACC in a lot of ways really did save my life. I did a whole infomercial about it. Some people can find it, some people cannot. I will never show you. But I did it because I think that it was important to tell people that you can make a career out of trade or out of industries that you can pay your way through in small installments. I didn't know that. I wish I did. I wish I hadn't have gone the large university route and put myself in so much debt. But being able to graduate from ACC, work several years as a paramedic in our city gave me a little bit of stability I needed to kind of move to where I am today. And it's what informs a lot of the work that I do with our medical stakeholders and also with our community at large. And I just want to say that the moment that Sarah came into my life, a lot of really interesting things started to happen. One of them was a community started to form around us. And our relationships got a little bit deeper. And I think a reason for that is that people really attach to our love story. I think that they don't really understand how trans people and non-trans people or two trans people or whatever end up in relationships. They've never considered this for themselves. It's probably a little bit of a foreign concept to a lot of folks. And when we started talking about our love story, I think it opened up a lot of questions for a lot of people. And I think we've seen that as a culture moving forward, like moving over these last couple of years, that a lot of people are learning about how they feel inside with their gender, how they feel inside with their sexuality. And I think our work has kind of formed this like shield around them. I feel like we kind of create this little protective bubble for people to explore and question and be curious. And I think it kind of starts with these simple things, which is on here, which I think Sarah should walk you through, which is the pronoun section, which is kind of like one of our simple little ways that we teach people how to be kind of direct in action. And it's how to change your pronouns on your Zoom or like other election. And like, I'm not gonna make you do it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know that I'm the person to walk anyone through Zoom. I am not your tech guru, but I think, the greater point that Rocky was making about the pronoun conversation, a lot of people kind of feel like pronouns, I look a certain way, people should know, or what does that matter? And we'll get into a little bit more about those kinds of things later, but as just kind of a very easy way to align yourself as an ally with the community, it can be a really nice thing to do, to bring up in conversation, especially if you don't consider yourself a trans or gender expansive person. It's a really nice thing to do to, if you are in a group setting, in a Zoom setting, to add your pronouns on your bio. So like mine would say, my name, Sarah Swafford, and then it would say they/she in parentheses, or they, them, or, sometimes another point, people that use multiple pronouns, maybe that day I'm just feeling only like using they, them pronouns, or maybe only she, her. But yeah, so changing your pronouns in your bio can be really helpful. And also just, if you're in a group setting, at like an in-person meeting or something like that, it's also a nice thing to kind of start the conversation and say, hi, my name is Sarah. My pronouns are they, them, she, her, and just to kind of open that up so other people also feel like they can open up and share their pronouns as well. And especially, those of us that consider ourselves allies, whether we are allies and don't consider ourselves part of the community, or we just want to help our siblings in the community. Either way, it's just, it's a nice way to kind of signal, hey, we can have this conversation, but nobody has to feel outed, so yeah, pronouns.
And I just changed our pronouns just to show you an example of how people might do this. Sometimes you'll see people add a little parentheses next to their name. I just go to the rename feature, and right next to my first name, I might take my last name out and add a parentheses and add he. Maybe I won't add he, him. Maybe I won't add he, him, his. Maybe I will.
Just one. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever feels comfortable to you. And I see people doing that already, and we really appreciate that.
I think really this is a great time to learn how to do it. I think it's a great time to know that sometimes you can add that in your Zoom feature so it pops up all the time. You don't have to redo it every time. So these are some of the ways that I see people use pronouns proactively. They add them to their email signature.
Yeah.
They change them in their Zoom settings. They wear name tags and provide name tags at their events so that people have the pronouns on the name tags.
Yes, I love the name tags at events, and you can actually buy ones that say, hello, my name is blank, my pronouns are blank. That's pretty cool. Some people also will get cute little trendy pins, that just say she, her, or he, him, they, them. And also just a little note, she, her, he, him, they, them. Those are just a few examples, but there are actually lots of what are called neo pronouns. We won't get into that mega list, but that is something else, so again, if somebody says, my pronouns are ze, zer, or, I've heard fae, fair, there are a lot of neo pronouns. So again, we want to, hold space for those, and understand that even if it's a pronoun that we haven't heard before, we try to do what we can to acknowledge that and respect that and use those pronouns as much as possible.
I love it. Okay, so that's pronouns. We start simple because I think pronouns, people may think the pronouns are simple, but I think that I say to those people, go read the comments below pronoun videos on the internet, and you'll see that it's actually kind of a good test to see what space you're in, where's the affirmation level at. Pronouns are kind of the first step along this journey. So that's why I kind of like to talk about it at top, but we're going to talk a little bit about our future and what we're going to cover next. So I'm going to reshare, and I want to talk a little bit about the uncertainty of our future. I think we're great. Most people think we're great. I think when people say keep Austin weird, they mean us. But there's a new sheriff in town, a new type of couple, a new type of family moving in. And it is very important to name that this is currently not a great environment for us to build our family and our community and our business and our future. And without naming that, we continue to perpetuate the violence against our community and communities like us who constantly have to live in the instability of the social context of whatever the next major concern is for our society. And right now, trans people like us are a major concern in society. So we want to kind of talk through some of the major themes we think are important to know, some of what we think is important to keep people like us in a cool place like this for a long, long time and pull more people from around the world. But I think it's important to say that our future is not in Texas until Texas shows us that they deserve our future. Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to name that.
The unfortunate truth, about that point that Rocky made is that many of us are feeling that pressure to relocate. And Rocky and I definitely are in a very privileged situation that we can even consider possible relocation, and that we have the support and the networks that we do to be able to do that, because that isn't always the case. And also just especially, another, in a strange way, privilege that we have is that we are just a couple, we don't have children. And so again, just, acknowledging that while it might be really hard for singles or couples, and especially in adults, TGE adults, it is that much harder on children or families with children. So, keeping them at the front of our mind and at the front of our movement is very important too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I feel like as we move forward, we just want y'all to know that we do this work and all work that we continue to do with y'all in mind. We know that in present company, we may have community, and we know that in the YouTube community and wider, whoever may see this, that you are really working to build your future, and we love you, we see you, and we appreciate you.
Yeah.
So today what we're going to cover are kind of these general topics. We'll touch on each one individually. We welcome you to ask questions anonymously or in the chat. We'll collect them at the end for 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so. We'll answer those questions, deep dive as much as we can. But I'm going to try to run us through these top few things: the community guidelines. We've already done our intro education, the 101 terms and general themes, which also includes a document that we've provided for you to review after.
Yeah, those 101 terms and themes are really just, for to be a touchstone for you all if you're unfamiliar. If there is something that we say that comes up, feel free to drop in the chat a question about that, but we probably won't go through these terms today just in the sake of time.
Yeah, I think we'll try to keep it mostly to the TGE community language, so that as we're speaking more naturally and talking to you, we're not losing you in that conversation. But this is not a 101 course. We do recommend people take a 101 course, and we do provide information on how to get those 101 coursings virtually and in person. Then Sarah's going to go into some of the relationship challenges, obstacles, and a general overview of what we're seeing that is necessary, what has helped us, what would help in the future. We'll talk about how to engage in more supportive relationships. We did provide a lot of the resources that we think are super important right now to your document that'll be added later. But we'll talk a little bit about advocacy work and the importance of the anti-violence movement within the trans community, naming that we've lost at least, I believe we're at number 17, trans people, to violence this year alone. And the numbers have reached as high as higher 50s that we know of over the last couple of years, each year gaining in more escalation. The only respite we had was the fact that we were socially isolated, but not as much as you would think, and we'll talk about that. The key messages and takeaways, we'll give you a couple of things to keep in mind in your brain bucket as you're moving forward into joining our community in this effort. And ongoing learning and connections, we'll kind of do a little bit of like, this is what I would do if I didn't know what to do. That's what we're going to talk to you about there. Cover some FAQs and then a little discussion. And I'm going to move into our community guidelines. We did already put this in our discussion, but anyone seeking education, understanding, connection, and collaboration and continuous support of TGE people and families across the world, this is for you. And these are what we think you should know right now. Mm-hmm. So first things first is trans community lives by community agreement and standard. Our culture is a very consenting culture. Our culture is a very loving and connected culture. And if anybody steps out of line, our culture is also an accountable culture. So we also understand that our community has also perpetuated violence in some situations that are very, very, very present in the community's mind right now. And I want to name that we are an anti-violence group. We do not condone any violence, and we do live by community agreements that you will see here. This is a small smattering of that. We do not want violence from our community or in our community ever. And we have fought for this for a very long time. And with things escalating, we think it's important to name that we are an accountable culture. So we want to say that these community agreements are kind of based on how we've kept that in line. You listen to understand and not to disprove. We are not here to argue the existence of our community. We're here to discuss what we know, our experience, and then kind of move forward from there. We're going to respect the lived experience of this work and this space, including the people in here that have things to add. We welcome you. Disruptions we would like to minimize, and we'd like to ask you to take space only when you need to and give space as much as you possibly can. This is a violence-free zone. Examples include misgendering, even people we don't like, even people that we're not sure.
Same with misnaming.
Right, and I mean malicious attempts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The spaces for genuine questions, we've covered that. You can always be private in your questioning. This is a tough space to question from. This is a space for culture sharing. We love our community and our culture, and we love sharing this with you.
Yeah.
And we know by just meeting us that we've already increased your chance of supporting our community tenfold.
Yeah.
And we think it's an important thing to continue. And we think that these discussions are super important to kind of closing this gap that we're seeing on all sides. No slurs, no exception, no hate. This is a discrimination-free zone, which we know because this is an ACC event.
Yeah.
We will not discuss hypothetical concerns, especially the ones presently in being used kind of in misinformation campaigns against us. And we will refer you to medical folks that we think can give you medical answers where we think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
And we do reject any misinformation that is currently in the social space. And we will not have any medical conversations like at all. I think today, I think we're going to limit.
I think
we're going to limit medical conversations.
Yes, exactly. I think anything that we touch on, that will be a very generalized kind of point. So.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for the narrative to be shifted there. People are really trying to shift it there, and I think it was important for us to be asked here to talk about relationships and how we kind of support this community, and how we end this conflict that we're seeing. Cool. So we respect the validity of, it's supposed to say developing info, meaning that we don't know everything, and we know that we're going to learn stuff from you and the world as we move forward.
Yes, this is this is a living, breathing organism, this community and this group of people, and our allies, yeah. Exactly. And we are constantly learning as much as you are. So we're happy to learn together.
And this last piece is just asking that if you have any follow-up questions after we speak today, we've already gone in about 30 minutes on this. We're going to kind of blast through this next 30 minutes and have a little discussion. Something's going to come up in your mind and you're going to say, I have got to ask Rocky and Sarah this question today. You might find us on the internet. That might happen, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend going to ACC and asking them your question, especially if there's any follow-ups, like you want to book us again or things like that. We know that people find us on the internet and want to connect with us, but we often
please know that door is always open.
That's great. But for business inquiries, we recommend that you reach out to the folks, your hosts here, because they are going to be really great about making sure you stay connected to us. Okay. But please, yes, come find us on YouTube. Come find us on the Instagrams. We love connecting. So let's go into our 101 concepts, if I could. Oh, sorry, anything to add?
No, but again, I think, this, these concepts are, really just kind of a touchstone for you all to reference and to look at if you're not familiar with these terms.
Yeah. And I think the ones that we'll kind of be paying attention to is everything kind of below LGB, which we consider to be part of the TGE kind of wider community. Those are the people that are not specifically being resourced under lesbian, gay, or bisexual resources. Super important in our region that we understand that resources are specific to each section of these groups, and some groups combine to get more resources. So there's less transgender people specifically, but maybe they can go with they can combine with intersex advocacy, which is something that we see a lot, and that gives us a little bit more voice in the space of advocacy. So when I say TGE, just know that I'm talking about kind of this everything under bisexual. They consider that an umbrella, but people don't like that, so I'm not going to say umbrella, but I'm just telling you that as far as the resources and advocacy organizations consider it, everybody under there, lesbian, gay, and bisexual, are part of the TGE serviceable groups. And I want to talk specifically about those groups. So we've seen a lot of buzzwords. We've seen transgender people in the news. We've seen drag queens in the news.
A lot lately.
Oh my gosh, we've seen gender expansive culture come in like a bang in the last, I'd say 10, 15 years.
Oh, the last 5, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
sure,
especially
yeah.
with the event of things like seeing into our ballroom culture through programs like Pose or other
Legendary.
Legendary. We've seen mainstream collision occur, I would say.
Mhm.
It's been brewing for a while. And another thing that we see is people will often try to intermingle these concepts of transness and drag culture. And we want to kind of talk a little bit about how that may not always be the case. Are there trans drag queens? Yes.
Absolutely.
Are
Many
there
of
gender
them.
expansive drag queens? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Many of them.
But I think that it's important to note that a lot of times when there's a discussion around drag queens at the same time as transgender people, sometimes that is a misinformation attempt to try to bring up something in your mind. So what do we think about when we think about drag queens? Excuse me. What do we think about when we think about drag queens? We think that this is a person who identifies as one gender or sexuality, maybe.
And is putting on a costume to portray maybe another gender or another sexuality.
Exactly. And I think when we are having the conversation about transgender people and let's say a discussion about restrooms, we might also see people correlate these two things into a kind of a misinformation campaign that tries to tell us that people who identify as one gender and sexuality are putting on a costume and
to be allowed to go
into
into spaces that are, you know, maybe not meant for them.
Right. And I think that what has happened ultimately, when you look at it from an advocacy perspective, is that all groups and anyone that is visibly different in our culture is being called into question on morality, on issues around whether or not they're appropriate for all society groups, like
whether they're safe for children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we have to start having these conversations where we come into community and we discuss the fact that transgender people and drag queens are not the exact same group.
No.
And in a lot of cases, you really have to be careful that when you're talking about transgender people, you really isolate the concerns, the issues, and you start to get people down to the level of these concepts: gender affirmation, gender expression, gender identity, gender transition. So what often these topics are trying to help people understand are, what does it look like to affirm a person in their gender? Well, it looks, so that question comes around our youth. What does affirmation look like versus transition? Yeah. Right? And if we don't know our language, our terminology, if we don't look at our references, we might miss kind of some of the details that are important there. So when we say trans women are women, then we are trying our best to discuss the concept that these folks have a gender identity. Their gender matches with that of a person who was born cisgender woman. Their gender matches in this concept. So they go, I don't feel like a cisgender man. I don't even feel non-binary. I feel like I was born a woman. Okay. That I think
my mind is a woman. My heart and soul is a woman. Yeah.
And I think another thing that we kind of often miss in this language is, okay, so they say that and then great, boom, they get started wearing dresses and then they just start living a woman. That's it. That's all they have to do. And when it comes down to it, like we said, we're not going to get into medical stuff, but the process of speaking to professionals, building your healthcare team, discussing gender in a truly a clinical setting, and coming up with a really great plan for how you're going to move through that. Does it mean that you want to have surgery? Not all the time. Does it mean that you want to even wear long hair and lashes? Not all the time.
This depends just as much as, all of us can relate to that, right? Like some days we wake up and we want to style our hair a certain way. We want to do our makeup a certain way or not. We want to dress a certain way. We are all expansive people and we are all complex people. So yeah, it's not necessarily going to be that we always present the exact same way every moment of every day.
Exactly. And so I put these terms specifically because I feel like sometimes that's where people are kind of a little bit still gray. So what does expression mean? What does identity mean? So I'll just give a top line read, but this is in your resource guide under trans terms that are provided by GLAAD, which is a media company that helps folks talk a little bit better about these terms and ideas. So a person's gender identity is a person's internal, deeply held knowledge of their own gender.
Yeah, and the key there is that it's internal. It's their internal, deeply held knowledge. So, this is not it is not our outward expression of it. It is our internal voice, our internal compass, as it were.
Indeed. And an expression, gender expression, would mean the external
outward, yes,
manifestations of gender.
How we choose to dress, how we choose to style ourselves, how we choose to present out in the world.
Our name, our pronouns, our behaviors. These are all kind of part of that expression. And I think that there's a lot of discussion about how does society change one's expression or somebody's identity or someone's, affirmation or their transition plan. And there's still a lot to discover about that. But I'll tell you that overall, what we know about quality of life in general with our community is that where there is not affirmation, there is very little of the rest.
Yeah.
And so that's important to note.
And when it comes to gender affirmation, that is, that's a lot what we can bring to each other. What we can do for each other is, affirming each other's gender expression and gender identities. Yeah,
exactly. And I don't, you notice that there's not other terms on here like kind of buzzwordy terms like cisgender or like things like that, because I think that, again, language can sometimes be used as a little bit of a weapon. And so when we're starting to talk about things like what does the Latin cisgender mean versus transgender, or what are we trying to say, that's not what's coming across the community. So I have started to move to trans and non-trans, or just talk about trans people in general. So you'll notice that I'm not referring to the opposite side of our culture. I'm referring just into our experience. Don't even want to talk about what folks outside of our culture want to be called, but know that you might see terms like cisgender and you might see people being frustrated about it, but that just means not transgender.
Yes, exactly. Okay? That's all it means. It doesn't have any special weight to it, and it's definitely not a derogatory term. It's simply a descriptor, just as transgender is neither a positive nor negative term. It is just a descriptor, like tall, short, fat, skinny, trans, non-trans, trans, cis.
Indeed. And the final piece on this slide that I'd like to talk about is the different types of transition that we see. So there's 3 general buckets that you'll see when people say gender transition. There's a social transition, a legal transition, and a medical transition. Social means we're telling our friends and families and coworkers.
We're telling our community, the people around us.
That we're going to dress differently, maybe that we don't really want to be questioned on this, that we're coming out, essentially.
We're establishing
our need, how we can be affirmed.
Yeah, we're sharing our pronouns, things like that. Exactly. We're letting people know, hey, I would like for you to acknowledge that this is who I am and this is how I would like to be responded to.
Indeed. And then you can also change legally your name. your
Or
gender marker.
marker.
Some people might see that there's an X option in some states now for people that are non-binary and do not want to put M or F on their
Or intersex.
exactly on their IDs.
Yeah, on their legal documents.
They don't want that. They want it to say X. So that's where you might see some bank record change, social security card change. Now I have a new name and I have a new identity, gender identity. Then you have a medical transition option that some people choose and some don't, which may include things like hormone replacement therapy and surgical procedures. But those are not always together. And sometimes people may choose to do some over others, and that's just enough for them to feel affirmed. So just know that when you're asking things like, are you fully transitioned? The reason why that is often balked at from a community member is because there's a lot when you say transition to consider, and people are often in multiple varying stages of that process.
Yes, and also acknowledging that there are many people that do not ever choose to medically transition or even legally transition for a myriad of reasons. They still deserve the same respect and love and kindness that we all do. It also does not make them any less trans if they decide not to have certain medical intervention or legal intervention.
Yeah. And I think it's important to just, the reason why we're touching on these things are these are common pushback areas that you might see in culture who hasn't yet been exposed to transgender community, TGE community, or people that are directly attempting to cause harm to the community. So it's important that we arm you with information. And now Sarah's going to move into some good stuff on relationships and cover these parts. I'm going to unshare so that you can enjoy your
my little notes.
Screen time. There you go.
All right. So yeah, we're just going to talk for a minute about some of the challenges or obstacles that we see in our relationships, that TGE people might encounter in their relationships. And when we think about relationships, a lot of people hear the word relationship and their brain immediately is like, oh, a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, a spouse, something like that. And yes, that's definitely one type of relationship. But as we know, literally any interaction we have with anyone, whether it's the person at the grocery store or, our spouse of 20 years and everyone in between, these are all relationships that we have every day. So some of the challenges, we'll start with the self. So, our TGE community in particular. Some of the challenges that we might see are things like internalized phobias. So like internalized transphobia. These outward societal pressures are very real and very prevalent. Familial pressures, these things are absolutely extremely real and palpable. And so that can cause a lot of internal turmoil there. There can be, this fear of living authentically because we are worried about rejection, which again, a very founded fear. Lack of resources for our community can also really lead to us not feeling safe to be our authentic selves and not feeling confident in the ability to make decisions in regard to things like social, legal, or medical transition. Then society. So right now we see I would say kind of our main obstacle right now that we're seeing really heavy at this moment is a real misrepresentation of trans and gender expansive people in media. And we're seeing it everywhere from actual news outlets, the major news stations and, newspapers and magazines and things. We see a lot of conversation right now about, bathroom bills, drag queen story hour. There's even been talk about like the social contagion of transness, as if transness or gender expansiveness is somehow a illness or virus that you could catch from, social exposure. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misrepresentation going on, with that right now.
And it's been
And
happening,
yeah, it's been happening,
Yeah.
as we know, like, especially like the bathroom bills, I think is something that a lot of people have kind of heard about. So again, it's like, these are narratives, like there is zero documented proof, evidence, even accusation that there's ever been any kind of issue with transgender people in public restrooms. There is no evidence to support that. That's an absolutely unfounded fear that is being perpetuated to push a very specific narrative.
Are trans people making people uncomfortable? 100% of the time. Like, it's not like, it's like, I think if you hear any reports of this, it's because people are reporting that they have discomfort, not that there's, you know what I mean? Like, I think that somebody that is in my bathroom is trans, and then there's an altercation that happens.
Which again,
right.
If we look at that, that's a personal problem, right? If I am offended because someone comes into the bathroom with a strong perfume on, that's my problem. I don't like that perfume. That's my problem. It's not a physical harm to me for that individual to exist with their strong perfume, if that kind of makes sense. And then another thing that, we're seeing a lot of, that we've seen a lot of since the beginning of time, and these are just some examples that we thought might kind of resonate, but there's also this really common negative stereotyping of trans and gender expansive or gender diverse people. And we see it like in TV and film and books specifically. And where we see this a lot is one of the first examples that I'm sure some of you might be familiar with is like the Disney villains. A lot of the Disney villains are very queer coded, which means that they are modeled after queer characters. One in particular is Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Again, pardon me if you're familiar with this example, but Ursula from The Little Mermaid was actually directly modeled. Her makeup, her features, even aspects of her body shape were directly modeled after a drag queen, a gender expansive person. And, she's the villain, right? Like, she's the evil queen, and she's harming people. And we see this throughout a lot of our children's, media. Is that these characters are always portrayed as like dark, evil, doing naughty, mean things. And then, at the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the blatant, over-the-top trans discrimination with one of, when I was younger, one of my favorite movies, Ace Ventura. That's like another common piece of media that many people are familiar with. There's a storyline in there where a character is outed as being, a female character is outed as being a trans woman, and everyone's, reacting in a really horrible, vile way. And we see a lot of things like that. There's The Crying Game, some of you might be familiar with. Silence of the Lambs, there's Buffalo Bill when he's tucking, which is a whole other conversation, but he's dressing and expressing himself a certain way, and again, he's the villain, right? So again, it's a lot of this kind of societal narrative, like trans people are bad, trans people are keeping secrets, gender diverse people are scary, bad, confusing people. And let's see. Okay. And then in regard to our family relationships. So many TGE people experience relationship strain, fractures, or total disconnection from their family due to being ostracized by their family of origin. A lot of things that we see are many trans and TGE youth, especially, are kicked out of their homes when they come out or when they are outed against their will. We have a very high population of teens and teens, young adults, even children experiencing homelessness because of this. Also, another thing that can happen with family relationships is sometimes TGE people can experience like a partner or spouse separation or divorce that can also cause them to be displaced from their home if they come out. Especially in the South region, but I mean, we found this to be true all over, at least the United States, as much as we can speak to that, but especially in like the South and in the Bible Belt, we see a lot of religious ideology or pressure causing family strain or disconnection. And then one other point that I personally wanted to really bring up is kind of this concept of family grief. So something that, we feel like was kind of a narrative that was really pushed forward for a while when we were as a community, fighting for more acceptance and more kindness and compassion was, okay, if you come out, your parents or your family, they are going to go through a grieving process, and you need to let them have that grieving process. And, what we have seen over the last few years and through the not only anecdotal evidence, but also the actual data that we have collected is that that's not always the most helpful narrative. While it's completely okay for people to have complex emotions around a transition journey or around their family member or loved one going through that, the idea that trans people should be the ones, or gender expansive people should be the ones holding all of this space for their family members, their loved ones to have grief is, we don't believe the most beneficial. I think again, if those emotions are coming up, that's when it's great to get support, from mental health care providers or things like that. But the idea that somebody has died and then been replaced with another person, we don't subscribe to that narrative. Everybody changes over the course of their life in one way or another. People grow, people expand. So that is what transition is. And so we want to hold more space for that. And we want to try, as community allies and loved ones, again, we don't want to put this pressure back on the TGE community to, I need you to hold space for my grief. That's not their responsibility. All right. And then when we talk about friendships or like romantic, intimate relationships, so a lot of times TGE people will feel rejected by their friends or partners. Once they've come out, they might feel some rejection. Once they've come out, their partner might, say, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. So that can cause some barriers there. But then especially, excuse me, everyone, especially we need to really highlight this point. So when it comes to our romantic and intimate relationships and our dating relationships in the TGE community, there is a very extraordinarily high level of intimate partner violence. Especially when it comes to trans women, and especially when it comes to Black trans women, even more so, the highest, and Black and BIPOC trans women in particular. We will spare you the details of that, but
it's 8 this year.
So far we have lost 8 lives. Yeah, we've lost 8 confirmed lives specifically to intimate partner violence. And yeah, I mean, that's a very serious problem. So that can obviously cause, a lot of stress. Let's see, bear with me, you all. I've got my little notes here. Yeah. All right. And then, community. So other barriers, just the lack of access that many TGE people have to the greater community. Like the internet is a great tool, but not everyone has access to that. A lot of us are living, we live everywhere, right? From big towns to tiny ones. So, sometimes the lack of community can really be a barrier. Or people that have to move from one community group to another, that can also be a barrier. And then just the resources looking different in different community groups. So, maybe you're in a place like Austin that is a little bit more resourced, and you move to Temple, Texas, it's a little bit less resourced. That might be a little bit more of a
This is
challenge.
often a shock to our youth that move into Texas for college or stay in Texas for college, and they think it's going to be the same as Austin, and they move to a different region. And shocking.
Yes, exactly. All right, so then so thinking about all of those things, how can we engage in more supportive relationships with the TGE community, with these people that we love and care about so much? So, if you yourself are kind of exploring your gender and you are wanting to cultivate a better relationship with yourself on your gender journey, we like to say, try to cultivate some self-love or self-acceptance rituals, things like journaling or leaving yourself little love notes, like make little sticky notes that you can stick on your mirror, and really focus on writing to yourself what you love and appreciate about yourself. What do you like about yourself? It might seem like kind of a silly practice, but over time, compounding, it really can be very positive. So just reinforcing those kind words to ourselves. And then other things that we can do is, exposing ourselves to more of this like positive TGE stories, positive TGE media. There's a lot of amazing, TV and film right now that really shows the joy of the TGE community. And so again, if you're kind of on a self-gender journey, that's a nice way to kind of support yourself, is to expose yourself to all that good stuff. And then as far as society, so the number one thing when we talk about these societal kind of like negative stereotypes and narratives, really vet your news sources. Really do what you can, do your due diligence, and especially, working with a group like ACC, I'm sure there are a lot of extremely capable people that can help walk you through how to properly vet your news sources so that you can seek out the most unbiased news and media possible that, really focuses on delivering that facts and information as opposed to the very opinion pieces and the stereotyping. And also, again, like critically analyze these shows and movies that we're watching and pay attention, like put your little feelers out, for the bias in like the movies and TV shows you watch, for the stigmatization and the stereotyping against the community. And instead, like we said, try to find some of those TV shows and stuff that, really focus on the joy. We highly recommend Legendary if you haven't seen already. It's a competition show.
I don't
and
know
it's
if you can watch it anymore because they canceled
HBO Max.
on
Watch the
HBO
old,
Max.
yeah.
There you go.
And Pose. Pose is an emotional roller coaster, but there's some beautiful, really high points. And then family. So, okay, yeah, if you consider yourself an ally to the TGE community or you're a part of it yourself, if you feel safe to do so, like, we really encourage you to have those tough conversations with your own family. If you hear them engaging or kind of perpetuating these negative ideas or harmful stereotypes about the community, you can offer to your family to share these, like we like to say, like the joyful resources, because we're really trying to move from a place of just tolerance to actual acceptance and kindness.
I think they call these I've heard tough conversations, but also one person in our community coined the phrase courageous conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that so much. So yeah, I mean, really, digging deep and having that courage to have those conversations with them, because we do have a lot of data that supports that knowing just one person, as Rocky referenced earlier, knowing just one TGE person, whether you know that person, in real life as a friend, or right now, like now, you know two trans people. If you don't know any more trans people, today you've met two. And so, this is going to exponentially increase your, likelihood of acceptance, understanding, and
seeking out information.
yes, exactly, more learning about the community. And then, yeah, if you are, a friend in a relationship with, you have a close loved one, some of the best ways to support them and engage in a more supportive relationship with them is like celebrate their coming out. If someone shares with you, like, this is a happy moment, this is a huge moment, and they're probably feeling a lot of emotions. But, when you have big news, even if you're feeling trepidatious about it, isn't it nice to be met with a big warm hug of like, oh, thank you for telling me. I'm excited. Yes.
What should we do? What should we party? Should we get
one little thing that Rocky and I do that's like, kind of silly, but our fun thing, we like to celebrate like our kind of coming out or transition birthdays or whatever you want to call them. Like we call Rocky's his T birthday. We call mine my NB birthday because I'm non-binary. And so like we try to do a special little thing that day and treat it just like a special fun day.
Usually a tea party.
Usually a tea party because it's a tea birthday.
We're trans.
Because we're trans. Yeah. We're real creative. And other things you can do, honoring their name and pronouns. Again, we know we've talked about pronouns so much, but it really is true. Like, just and asking them, people, especially your friends that that maybe use multiple pronouns, saying, hey, I see you use multiple pronouns. Is there one that you prefer over the other? Or today, which pronoun would you prefer that I use? Sometimes they will have a preference, and that feels really affirming for you to ask that. Oh, another thing, as far as honoring the name, when Rocky first came out, a friend, as the day that he got his legal name change, and we were celebrating that, a close friend of ours got him a really cute name plaque for his desk that said his legal name. And that was a really fun, sweet little way to celebrate.
Hot gift ideas. That's why we're YouTubers. Okay, so.
And then, just really quick. And then, finding ways to help support them in their transition journey. So this is a little bit of a kind of next level, but it can be really important. So say you have your partner has just come out and you really want to support them. Something that you can do, let's say they want to go get a gender affirming haircut. They're tired of having long hair. They want a more masculine cut. You could call ahead to a couple of salons and ask them, hey, are you LGBTQIA plus friendly? My partner is trans. I want them to have a safe space. Are you going to, how are you going to accommodate that? And just kind of do some of that early vetting for them. Really can help, so they don't have to do it. They don't have to make all the calls themselves. So
that's a great point.
Yeah, that's just a few ideas. Thank you for listening to all of that dense information.
And fully understanding that we're moving into our last little bit. So please don't forget to send any questions you may have. A lot of times, if I don't see the questions just popping off, we'll kind of keep giving you info. We are going to give you some space to give us some feedback and discussion.
Yeah, we know this has been a lot at once that we're throwing at you. And yet, like we said, we're barely scratching the surface. So please, no hesitation if you have any questions.
Indeed. So I'm gonna reshare the key takeaways while we're getting all of our questions all tabulated. Then we'll hit those questions, a few FAQs, and I think we'll call it a day today. We really appreciate the space to talk about this stuff.
Thank you all so much.
All right. So some key takeaways we got. There's no one way to be a perfect ally.
Yeah, do not be too hard on yourself. It's the fact, like, showing up with love and compassion in your heart is the most important thing.
I think the perfection is something that we need to really work on in our culture. I think that's not a really a good goal to have as a culture. I think perfection is probably not the name of the game. So we should probably not just try to be perfect allies, but you don't have to be a perfect trans person either.
Right. And there's no no way to be perfect anyway. So don't be so hard on yourself.
Okay. Oh, did you want to do this? I'm sorry. Is this one yours?
No, go ahead.
Oh, cool.
Just together. We're doing it together.
Oh, gotcha. Let me, you don't have to understand someone's identity to respect it. I call that cultural humility over cultural competency. So being somebody who has humility, it means I'll never understand, but I still love and respect you. And I think that's a really good place to come from. You can't always tell if someone is trans simply by looking at them.
Yes, and that's a very, very important point to remember. Like, we can't just rely on, you know, what outfit they are wearing or what their haircut looks like to determine their gender identity or their expression.
There's no, if you don't know what pronouns to use, you should ask. You should ask and continue to have courageous conversations around what is appropriate for that day, that hour, that moment. Be careful and considerate about what other questions you ask, especially around medical care and things that are otherwise protected.
Yes, and if you find that, you know, you do have questions that, you know, you wish you could ask your friend, but you don't want to offend them. Like, again, that's when, you know, we say, try to look at some of the resources that we've sent you, or reach out to somebody, even like us, like shoot us a DM, because we've already identified ourselves as okay with asking those questions. So instead of putting that burden on your loved one, maybe go for somebody that has already identified themselves as a question person.
Yeah, and continue to send these in to your hosts, because I think that they also have a really good intention to continue this conversation for a long time. Yes. And I think that is really the best way to get educated. Someone's trans identity is their private information to share, so do not out people. Don't even out us, you know, like, oh, I know Rocky and Sarah are trans. People will get there. Yeah. People will get there. Don't worry about it, but just don't offer information if you don't have to. It's a point of safety, especially during higher levels of violence for our community. Yes, right. It happens a lot to us. That's the only reason why we're saying it. Don't tag us in things and be like, hey, trans person right here, do you see this awful trans story? Don't do that. That's not helping us as much as you think it would. But if you do hear of a parent or somebody like that that just needs to connect and you can't get them connected, that's a lot of the times when people will just DM us, sorry to bother you, or send an email or send a connection through your host. Yeah. So avoid compliments or advice based on stereotypes about trans people. Like, oh, I can't believe that, Rocky. I can't believe you're trans. You don't even look trans. That is not a compliment. And don't talk about how men should look or act and, oh, how you act so this way or that way. We just keep it out of there and talk about things like how smart people are, right? Like,
yeah, how you appreciate their loving heart, yeah, or how you appreciate their affinity for knitting.
That's actually a trauma-informed tip, and it talks about not talking about appearance-based compliments, and I think it's a really good one to keep into this community as well. Speak out in support of transgender people. The silence right now around what's happening is concerning, and it's actually based in misinformation and concern and education not being where it needs to be. We know that. That's why we lead with education. And you really should know that trans rights are under attack right now. We're not embellishing. It's very clear. It's the only thing they worked on this whole time we were all isolated under a pandemic. Yeah. And we really should talk about that, not from a perspective of our bacon being cooked, which we already knew that this was a problem in Texas, that we were under this scrutiny. But I want to let y'all know that this is a real issue for general human rights, because as we say, trans rights are human rights, and we'll see that over time as it starts to unfold to be more about those taking away rights than what they are making it seem like it is, which is a social protection.
Yes, and just so you know, just so you're aware, I believe the last number was there's been 495 plus bills introduced across the United States just in the last 2 years.
Yeah, for this legislation.
For this, yes, you know, anti-trans, anti-TGE bills.
And a lot of these policies are directed at children, but also directed at things like general care access. I think it's important to note that the United States government is one of the largest employers of transgender people, and most of our transgender employed people are a part of our military. So please always remember that you have multiple facets of impact, including the people that are fighting for us today. And we do thank thank y'all for continuing to hold the line, even though your community is not supporting you. Push and also push for support and inclusivity, not just tolerance. We're going to let the floor open and let our host have, I'm just lost my little cursor. We're going to stop share and let's see if I can do it this way. A little stop share button. There we go. Perfect. All right. Let's see the chat. Let's see what we got. Should I just read from these, or do you want to give them to us in order? I see one. What do you think about using they, them in the classroom for everyone unless they have told me otherwise?
Yes, I think that is a really great way to just start. Of course, there's never one perfect fits all solution for everybody. So, there is always the possibility that won't be a perfect fit for somebody. But I think as a general rule, most people in the TGE community, that's what a lot of us do for each other. And that seems to be a generally pretty accepted way. But you can also just avoid pronouns as well, like, hey, y'all, hey, folks,
hey, partner,
hey, sweeties,
buckaroo,
hey, little honeybees,
homies.
Things like that as well. But yeah, I think definitely like they, them as erring on the side of caution until corrected otherwise is completely fine.
Yeah, I think most people would do that anyway.
Yeah,
that's how I usually will roll with it. And I love the second question. Sorry, so I'm just trying to get them in there. What do you think of discussing news and issues related to the TGE community in the classroom? I have had a trans student say that they hoped we would not do that because they feel fatigued by having to discuss such issues in so many classes. And I'm gonna
such a good
second, third, and fourth that student and say that if you're talking about our youth especially, lead with examination, right? I would say lead with the concept of, yeah, we have all this bad news. Now let's really like dig down into there. How much of that bad news became something that actually affected us? How much of that bad news was clouding good news? Can we get a more clear understanding of what's happening? I think our youth should be very engaged in what's happening. Many of them have shown that they want to know the ways in which they can get active in advocacy, right? Joining up with our youth leaderships, how they can show up in these spaces to give their testimonies. Now, testimony classes, how to change your name in legal gender marker classes, how to make your plans classes, talking to them about
or directing them to those resources.
To those resources like out youth.
If you don't feel personally that you could offer that to them, that how to offer that, directing them to those resources. And like Rocky also said, focusing on the joy. If you can find because they exist, positive trans stories, even if those stories are works of fiction, like these works of fiction are still based on real people.
And I think that the thing I notice is that we have to remember these kids are seeing information all the time.
Oh yeah.
And where they're getting that information is often on social.
Yeah.
And even though we try to make that a negative thing, I want to name that there are so many creators right now who are doing their work to make sure that there is a even distribution of information out there for those kids to see. One of my favorite is Aaron in the Morning. One of the things I would say is giving the kid the opportunity to go look for the good, right? Make them the new leader of that segment of, we're going to talk about this stuff. What do you want to share? What do you think we should know? Because they're going to have the goods, y'all. They're going to have the goods. If I go watch Erin in the Morning and I look at the color of the lights in the background of her thing, tell me if it's good news or bad news. That's a trauma-informed way to make sure that our youth have a visible way to go. If I'm watching a video with a green light in the background on Erin in the Morning, it's going to be good news today.
Yeah.
Now that's a super important way for them to take over, like take control of their emotional capacity to learn this information and like move forward with it. That's all I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great question. My gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, and thank you for being here. I know folks gotta leave soon, but we will stay for questions and do a few FAQs before we end today.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. And like both of those were wonderful questions. We really appreciate that thought. And also I'm getting the impression that, you all are educators, teachers, educators, and your work, we come from families of educators. The work that you're doing is critical, and it's so much more than just teaching the books and the tests and everything. It's the personal care that you give. So thank you for that.
I can hear you, I think.
I
Oh.
wanted to hop in really quick. Apologize, I got kicked off the Zoom, and I missed the two really great questions. I don't know if this is one of them, but I noticed earlier Loretta had asked a question. Did you address that one?
I don't think I saw it.
Okay. She had asked, and I think this was for Sarah. I think she was curious about your use of both the she, her, and the they, them pronouns. And I don't know if you care to share
Yeah,
more about your
absolutely.
choices around that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I personally, my gender journey has, been a long, fun experience. So for me, there was definitely kind of a time period where I felt like I wanted to use multiple pronouns because it might be easier for people in my life, that had known me a certain way. And that's a valid reason. Like, it's okay to have time where you might want to do something like that. I've since moved into a space where, I feel like using multiple pronouns just really is, an accurate reflection of who I am. I definitely have moved into more of a space where I have more of a preference of one pronoun, or certain pronouns over others. So I sometimes use less of one or the other, but really it's just like how we can describe ourselves in so many other different ways. This is just a way for me to try using the limited language that we have to encompass the wholeness of who I am, which is, really for me feels like an impossible task most of the time. But, sometimes it's kind of like trying on a pair of pants and being like, does this fit? I guess this is okay. Yeah, this will work. But, who knows what time will bring. I might expand on that journey even further. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that was a great answer.
Thank you.
I just scrolled up and saw that. I'm so sorry. Did we miss any other folks and their questions before we kind of conclude here? Just have a few more items.
Not that I'm aware of. Again, I missed a little bit. I know Ellen said that they had a question. She had a question. And I assume perhaps you all.
Yes, I
There's a
think we
question from Ellen.
Yeah, they them.
classroom. Yeah, we answered. I think we answered
Okay.
those. So
I
Oh,
do
and
have
then,
another question if we have a few
Yes,
minutes.
please go ahead.
please, yes, we do.
So much of how we socialize, whether it's friends, even friends, definitely partners, is gendered. Like, hey bro, or sister, right? It's so gendered. So I'm just wondering if you have any wisdom for us when we have maybe a coworker or a family member who we are so used to kind of interacting with them. It's like, she's just one of the girls, right? Then how do we pivot on that and even change how we're even giving affection to the person? It's just it can be actually a very big pivot. So obviously you can't like completely, answer the whole question, but do you have just some wisdom for how to navigate through that?
Want to start? You want me to?
I mean, I think you're on a roll. You go ahead.
Well, you can piggyback off of this, but yeah, so something that comes up for me, because this is very present in both of our lives for sure, is, it is kind of a funny place, especially when we have these really long-term relationships with family. Like, for example, I have 3 sisters, so it's a lot of you girls, the girls trip, girls weekend,
Yep.
and sometimes I get a little fatigued, by that, and I'm like, I do so much of this in my day-to-day life that when it comes to my family of origin, I don't want to deal with that as much. So really, one of the things that I do is just I do have one sister that I'm much closer to, I guess, in a way. And so we are able to talk a little bit more freely. And that definitely helps because she is kind of an ally for me. So she tries to drop my they, them pronouns into conversation a little bit more for me. But, let's say that she's not involved in that situation, or it's friends or whatever. Also, I just kind of try to, I guess it's sort of a lead by example situation, where when I'm in these groups, and if someone's like, oh, I'm so glad we're all together, I love a girls' night, I'll be like, yeah, hanging out with friends is really great, or again, if we're in a group and everybody is, being very gendered, like, oh, the bros over here and the chicks over there, I love to be like, yeah, all these folks are so beautiful. What beautiful humans. And it might feel kind of silly and forced. And there might also be this kind of vein of like, are people going to think I'm correcting them because I kind of am, but I don't want them to be offended. But ultimately it's like, well, that's kind of their thing to deal with. I think the worst case scenario is, if you're in that situation and you're like, yeah, I really love hanging out with y'all, or, you kind of change the language and somebody kind of, it activates them and they're like, what is that about? Then it's either an opportunity to have a courageous conversation, or it's an opportunity to just be like, oh, I don't know, I'm just saying, if you're fatigued as well and you don't feel like getting into it, you don't have to. But I think that is something that at least it kind of plants the seed, right? Like it's kind of the whole like lead a horse to water thing, plant the seeds, lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, they're going to have to come around to that on their own. But I think that's such a great question because it's so palpable.
It's a kind of this concept that they talk about in advocacy called the movable middle. So it's really gauging, am I in a safe space to kind of explore if I can introduce this new language? Do I feel like it's important that we do that? And I think oftentimes okay, so this is one of my favorite tactics. If I'm in a room with a cisgender man and we're just chatting and he's like, oh yeah, bro, like, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh yes, sir, absolutely. I'm sorry. Is it okay to use he, him pronouns for you? It takes them to a whole, because they're like, what, you're respecting me? Like they don't understand, but it is easy to open this conversation in such natural ways where people are like, I didn't even know I had pronouns, and they start to glitch but it's very important to kind of sneak it in the ways that Sarah described. But I'll just give you a real world example of what I do to kind of put the conversation back in their court. How do you feel about it? And I know we have 5 more minutes, so I don't want to, sorry, did we answer your question? Yeah. Oh, good. Excellent. And I just wanted to really quick, I know we're running out of time. These questions, keep them coming. I appreciate it. Real quick on advocacy, just real quick. We gave you an FAQ list on your resource guide. You can read through some of those common things. If anything is striking you as difficult, send an email to your team here and they will get to us and we'll try to cover some of that. The advocacy piece, what do I do if I am someone that wants to join the movement to support trans families, especially here in Texas right now, which is a great time? The Equality Federation is made up of multiple organizations, LGBTQIA organizations, faith-based organizations, and other groups that are dedicated to ending the violence, not only against TGE people, but all queer people. Exactly. People. And the Equality Federation is on your resource guide. I highly recommend pick one. My favorite is Transgender Education Network of Texas, mostly because it is a BIPOC or a people of color run organization, and it is also one of the few and largest trans-led organizations in our state. It has a historical significance for fighting the general stuff that we see every 2 years. Our advocates and stakeholders in the space of education are welcome to come forward, provide letters of support, provide testimony, push back on their particular groups of folks that they think they need this education. Tell us who needs the education. You don't have to always be fighting. You can be part of solutions of inserting information, and also know that resources exist in a very specific and specialized web that makes sure that people are not outed trying to receive their support. So sending people through private channels is no longer the best way to do this. We recommend that you reach out to folks like Out Youth. or folks like Algo, or folks like Tint,
Equality
or
Texas.
Equality Texas, or HRC. These folks will route you regionally. And I'm talking about our teachers that we know are struggling in outside of Travis County regions. We are all connected, and I know that the education group talks to each other a lot. Those resources are available through almost every major institution as well. UT has excellent programming and training. So I really just want everybody to know those links should help you at least connect, and they'll take you there from there. But we want advocates, we want any type of advocate to please note that you are welcome in the space, even if you are not a trans person. And I think that probably will be our time to say goodbye.
Yeah, is there we got a couple minutes left. If there's anything else that anybody would like to chat
Add
about?
or
Yeah,
yes.
add or let's see.
I see. Oh, thanks.
Oh, yes. Yeah, again, thank you all so much for your sweet, like, patience, kindness, listening ears, and open hearts. Like, that's, like Rocky said, there are so many ways to get involved in the advocacy networks. And, really just on a personal level, like having your open hearts, having your open minds is the
Yes.
best way. Yes, we do have a YouTube channel.
It's called Rocky and Sarah. And we share a little bit of how we are exploring the world and finding slightly more inclusive places to build community. And we hope to continue to do that here too, y'all.
And I'll pop our IG in the chat,
which is provided to y'all in the event info, I think.
So,
but there you
yes,
go.
please connect with
You're
us.
very welcome to connect there.
Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're muted. I think you're muted. I can't unmute.
Thank you for letting me know.
Oh, sure.
Yes, but thank you so much to both of you. This has been such a warm and wonderful, supportive way to learn more about how to be an ally to the TGE community. And we're just very, very, very grateful for you. And we're very grateful for all of you who joined us today,
Yeah.
who see this on a future occasion when it's uploaded as a video. So thank you again. And this is our last event in this series for the year, but we'll be back in the fall with more great content for you all. So thank you so much.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Bye.